good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first quarter earnings call. For clarity of the voice, I'll take off my mask, but we'll observe the COVID protocol. So join with me in the room today are Kun Manop on my left-hand side, our CFO, and Dr. Yan Yong, our Chief Economist, on my right-hand side. We also have a number of executives from the bank joining us on the call. We have Kun Vipan and Kun Sarat, the other two presidents, as well as Kun Anisha, our Chief Risk Officer, along with several other executives in the group. So given that it's remote and most of us are not in the room, so there might be some logistics issues, but I think they're also there to answer any questions that you might have. So please bear with us if there's some sort of logistics issues along the way. We announced the results noon yesterday, so you probably had a chance to already look at the numbers and have a chance to go through. Some of you already published some of the early reactions and results. We'll go through the numbers again today, and we'll save enough time for Q&A, which I'm sure you have quite a few. So what we'll do today, we'll structure the session into three sessions. First, we'll have Dr. Yan Yong talk about the macroeconomics, the outlook, and the COVID, and what is our perspective of the recovery pattern, and what's to come in the remaining part of 2021, and also perhaps a little bit longer in term, in a couple of years in terms of the recovery. And then our CFO will go through the numbers and kind of share with you guys the analysis, MD&A part, and then the last part is of course the Q&A, which will make sure that we have sufficient time. We set aside about 2 hours. Hopefully we remain within that allotted time, and if we end early, that's also fine too. All right, so with that, we'll start with Dr. Yan Yong, our Chief Economist, for about 10 minutes. He'll give us his perspective on the situation. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Kunala. Good morning, everyone. Let's start on the big picture of the COVID crisis. So let me start with the latest new COVID cases. As you can see that the surge in Thailand is actually part of the global surge of the new cases of COVID that started in March. And this time you might be surprised that despite the progress, the discovery of the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, but we still observe a big surge of new COVID cases. This is as a result of the new. This is as a result of the new surge of the new variant of the COVID variant, especially the UK variants. Okay, and so you can see that there's a rising cases in India, in Brazil, in Turkey, in France. Even in the case of the US, even though the number might be high, but it's still lower, much lower than the previous peak that used to be around 250,000 per day, because US also made a lot of progress in vaccination as well. Okay. Now, as you know, every country in the world are in the race to vaccination. Now, I think there's an uneven prospect for this. Most of the advanced economy will have a herd immunity, which we define by roughly about 70% of population have been vaccinated. And this is as a result that most of the advanced countries have access to more vaccine. As you can see in the picture, for example, Canada have access to COVID vaccine up to 5 times of its population, and most of the advanced nations have more vaccine than their population. While on the lower panel, you can see most of the developing countries, including Thailand, will have so far fewer access to vaccine compared to population. Especially in case of Thailand, as you know, the government has announced that they have made the purchase agreement up to 63 million doses, so that should cover around 31.5 million population, roughly about 50% of population this year. But obviously, just a couple of days ago, the government just announced that they're in the plan of make an additional purchase of 35 million, but we still wait and see clarification on the timing for that. As a result of these different uneven access to vaccines, as I show you in the middle panel, so far many advanced countries have made quick progress in vaccination. For example, Israel is up to more than 60% of population. UK, US also made a very fast progress as well. In case of Thailand, so far we have only about 1% vaccination of the total population. So most of the advanced countries, we expect them to have herd immunity by either the second quarter or the third quarter of this year, while most of the developing countries, including Thailand, will have herd immunity next year. For Thailand, we now looking at the base case is at second quarter of next year, but obviously this will be affected by both in terms of upside if the government able to make available more vaccine, but also on the downside risk as well, especially the issue of the side effect of the vaccine, and that could affect the confidence and the acceptance of the Thai population in terms of vaccination. So this is something that we need to monitor closely. Now, given that a number of countries, especially in the advanced country, show resilient growth, as you may have heard, the IMF have just last month forecast that the global economy will grow by 6% this year. So that is quite a strong recovery from last year at minus 3.3. But it's going to be uneven growth, as I mentioned, because of the progress in vaccination. But I think the good news we have seen is that for the manufacturing sector, which I represent here, the PMI, the Purchasing Manager Index, for manufacturing, you can see it's above 50 and rising in many countries, especially in US and in Europe. As a result, it have been the supporting factor for the recovery of export growth in the region. On the right panel, you can see many countries in Asia have show strong export recovery, including Thailand. The first 2 months, if we exclude gold, actually Thai export grew about 5.1%, and today the number for March will come out. We expect a strong reading as well. Obviously, our export growth may not be as strong as some other regional partners, but nevertheless, it's on the rising trend. And actually, EIC had just made a new revised forecast for export. So we up from 6.4% this year, and we expect the export growth to rise to 7 to 9% this year. So that's a good news. Unfortunately, on the another front, which is the foreign tourists, I have to say though that when our previous forecast at 3.7 million foreign tourists is relatively low already compared to 39 million of 2019 and 6.7 million of last year. But I think the latest development, both in terms of the new COVID case in Thailand and also the new development of policy stance among the countries that have expressed their concern with the surging cases, especially for the new variants. So despite the fact that the Thai government have planned and announced that they will try with the Phuket sandbox, whereby they will no longer quarantine just in the hotel in the third quarter of this year. But the number of foreign tourists will depend largely also on how open other countries will allow their citizens to travel abroad. And this, I think, one example are very telling. UK is a country that will, among the first few countries that will have herd immunity in the second quarter of this year. And they already consider implementing what they call traffic light system, whereby they will classify countries around the world into 3 groups, green, amber, and red. So say if you in the green country, UK citizens can travel and come back without any no quarantine when they come back to UK. But if the country belong to the amber and red group, then there will be 10-day quarantine. So that would be a strong friction that may prevent UK citizens to travel to these countries. And the criteria, the main criteria are threefold. One is the COVID case in that country, the second vaccination rate, and third is the report of new variants of COVID. And I'm afraid that in all these three criteria, it's unlikely for Thailand to be in the green color. We might end up in the amber color, and that could serve as another hindrance for the recovery of Thai tourist sector. Obviously, there's uncertainty how other countries will react or follow or not follow the UK system, but most of the countries that herd immunity will be advanced countries, and they tend to be very, very health in terms of have a strong health standard. So this is something we need to be aware of. Now, this slide I'm just showing you that before the new surge of the COVID case, we already seen some bottoming out of the second wave COVID that have a peak in the cases in January. So you see that most of the January economic indicators see the red color, so that show the trough of the economic indicator. Then in February and March, we have already seen some recover, but that will change with the new cases. Now, this picture I'm just showing you that to highlight the difference of the third new wave, right? The third wave. I think one as you can see from the picture, the third wave is the peak is higher than compared to the first and second wave. Another important characteristic is that most of cluster concentrated in Bangkok, which is where the economic activities have the most in terms of the purchasing power. And now in this time, all COVID cases have been reported throughout every province around the country. So that's shown by the country map that you see most of the provinces are either in orange or in red color. Now the government is still trying to not to put stringency on the movement compared to the previous time, right? So, but what we already seen from the high frequency data, whether it's Google mobility or the Facebook movement that we've seen for the past week, we already see that people have cut down their movement, and that could be a proxy for economic activities in April as well. Now, for other high frequency data that we have explored is on the left hand side is Google Trend. So this is when people search in Google for this type of economic activities. So they follow, I think we still see a similar pattern, similar to the first and second wave, during the third wave here, whereby most of face-to-face activity have been cut down. We can see negative contraction. As well as the domestic flight, we can see that a lot of people cancel the trip during Songkran Festival. Now, so that lead to EIC analysis on the impact on domestic consumption. Obviously, we expect the pattern of consumption impact will follow similar pattern. It's an uneven pattern, whereby most of the face-to-face services and durable consumption will be more affected compared to necessary items. And this wave, in the base case, we will expect that will take around 2.5 months for the COVID case to be contained. And that will impact around 240 billion baht of consumption, roughly about 1.5% of GDP. Obviously, this will add on to the scaling effect on the Thai economy, which are threefold. One is the worsening business dynamics. We already see, last year we see new firm entry reduced by 11%, while zombie firm, in technical definition, is the firm that the profit could not cover interest payment. We also expect it to rise. Second aspect is in terms of labor market. I think the unemployment rate might be not that high at 1.7, but we also observe a lot lower in terms of work hours, and also increase in self-employed compared to reduction in employers and private employees, and self-employed tend to have a lower income. And lastly, the scaling effect will be felt in terms of worsening balance sheet, especially in the household sector. As you know, household debt to GDP have rise to a new peak at the end of fourth quarter of last year at 89.3%. So we expect over the next 2 or 3 years, the household sector will repair their balance sheet, or what we call in economics term is deleveraging process. So the household will try to cut down unnecessary spending and debt, and so these have impact on consumption going forward as well. So obviously the government will spend more. Now we expect that for the 1 trillion borrowing budget, I think right now the government has about 280 billion baht left. Before the new surge, we expect they might not use all of this amount, but with the new surge, we now expect they will use up all this amount, about 280 billion. So this will, but the additional stimulus will not be enough to prevent to compensate for the reduction in consumption that I just showed. Okay, there's a room for the government if they choose to do to borrow more, but I think right now the government is concerned in terms of the public debt to GDP at 60%. EIC view is that government has the room to borrow more. I think the market will absorb that additional borrowing, but in the best case, we still see that government is still reluctant to borrow more. And so I end up on this the last page to give you the overall picture. So in terms of GDP growth, before the new surge, EIC forecasts that 2.6% of GDP growth this year. Now we paring down to 1.8 to 2.2%. I think the big picture that I want to provide to you is that if you look at last year of minus 6.1 and this year around 2% growth, that means at the end of this year we will still not going to return back to the pre-crisis, pre-COVID level of 2019. And I think now we will take at least until early part of 2023 before we reach back to the 2019 GDP level. So overall, Thai economy will is along the slow and gradual recovery with some significant downside risk that we need to monitor. Thank you.
Okay, got it. So let me propose that we save the questions. If you have macroeconomic questions, we'll save it towards the end as well. Let Kim Manop, our CFO, run through Q1 highlights and go down into the numbers first.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Yen Yong, for giving us the macro perspective. Now, let me walk you through key features of our first quarter results and some of the latest development. It was a strong quarter for us. We managed to grow fee income on a year-on-year basis, and we keep OPEX down even on a Q-on-Q basis. So this is driving our resilient operating profit for the first quarter. And this quarter, I would say, it was the first time that we reported meaningful contribution from SCB 10X investment. And this is going to the non-NI part of our P&L. So given the commitment that we put into SCB 10X investment, is good that we started to see contribution in this area. And I think from time to time, we will see development in this area. We continue to grow our digital users and build our platform, in order to support digital banking development. Right now, digital revenue contribution is still small on a bank-wide basis, but this is something that I think we should see the contribution become more meaningful in the next few years. So Robinhood, we have good progress in terms of building our food and delivery platform. The users has been growing quite steadily, and we certainly target big numbers in terms of user base and also merchant base for this year. And so far, we have seen good progress in this development. Now let me spend a few minutes to talk about relief program for the first quarter. The approach to relief program and asset quality for us remained unchanged. We keep provision prudently at an elevated level. We conducted qualitative NPL in order to make sure that those customers who eventually will not be able to survive would go into NPL. So that will basically eliminate or help eliminate the cliff effect when the local rules end by the end of this year. So all in all, we want to make sure that we have prudent and strong buffer against future uncertainties. Now, when we look at first quarter relief program, the outstanding amount actually edged up a little bit to 429, and this made up 19% of our total loan portfolio. The increase is coming from the retail segment, and I would say the incremental is back-end loaded for the quarter, so basically coming in February and March mainly, and still the incremental were mainly coming from secured customers, so namely mortgage and auto customers. And we also take note that of the new incremental customers in the relief program, actually about 20% was new enrollment. So, a customer who has never been in the program before. And in fact, most of these are self-employed customers. As a bank, we have a rather large retail portfolio, even though on the overall basis, most of our customers, more than half, is salary person, but we do have a fair share of self-employed customers. So under the prolonged pandemic, and as Dr. Yan Yong just mentioned, that the second wave, third wave, actually the peak is much higher than last year, and the impact seems to be quite widespread. So that's why we picked up some new enrollment into the relief program for the retail segment. SMEs actually performed better than our original expectation. More customers exited the program than customers seeking further assistance. And we would like to attribute this to our restructuring efforts and our teams who work closely with SME customers, and the fact that we so far still had a limited lockdown, which allowed economic activities to continue. And global trade recovery was also one of the reasons we believe that support SME performance in the relief program. Now, when we look at the overall portfolio, relief portfolio right now, the way we look at this is that we assess the ability to pay when customers exit the program. We noticed that in the first quarter, the ability to pay for customers when they exit the program weakened somewhat slightly, but we still want to say that it remained well within our expectation. The reason that we say that this is still well within our expectation is because still over 60% of the exiting customers are still servicing their debt according to the terms set by the bank when they enter the program. So, with the fact that they can come back and exit the programs and making this payment is still quite positive. But the reason we say it's weakened somewhat a little bit because compared with the fourth quarter, we were talking about high 60s. Now we are looking at over 60%. So all in all, we still can say that more than 90% of the customer when they exit the program still making payment in some form or the other in the first quarter. So you see, so that means that the non-payment risk is still well within not more than 10%. So as long as this ratio continue to be the case, we believe the impact from the overall relief program remain under control and manageable for us given the high provision level that we have right now and also the qualitative NPL that we did all along. Now, the other risk segment in the relief program is the hotel customers. Nothing changed much in the first quarter versus previous years. Hotel customers accounted for roughly 1/3 of the non-retail relief customers. So for this year, we will look at the long-term solution for these hotel segments. And of course, those who we believe will not be able to survive at the end of the day, we actually downgraded them qualitatively already in the past to become NPL. Then for those who we believe can survive with some kind of restructuring, then we have an option of long-term debt restructuring and asset warehousing. But right now, given some implementation considerations that we need to look at or assessing for asset warehousing, we look at asset warehousing as the last resort in terms of hotel sector. We still want to emphasize that our hotel customers in the relief program are quite highly collateralized. So the eventual risks from this should still be within our control. So that's the update on the relief program. Now let me walk you through a few more numbers for our first quarter results. Generally speaking, we have good profit growth. Operating profit remains strong. The NIM stabilized Q1Q given our effort to improve balance sheet efficiency, but yield on loan still weakened on a quarter-to-quarter basis. We kept our operating cost control quite well. Cost-to-income ratio was at 40% for the first quarter. We kept provisioning level, even though lower than the previous quarter, much lower than the previous quarter, but it's still at the elevated level, 177 basis point for the quarter. And we believe that this would give us a good enough buffer for future uncertainties. Now, let me go to some of the key pages. NIM, our NIM for first quarter stabilized, basically dropped slightly 1 basis point from the fourth quarter. But within this, you will notice that actually yield on loan dropped quite a fair bit. But we did manage to improve our LD ratio. Our LD ratio has gone up to around 97% from 93% in the previous quarter. So together with the reduction in the funding cost, we managed to improve the LD ratio as well as to bring down certain bucket of the cost of deposit. So this helped show up the reduction in the loan yields. So the net impact is net interest margin stabilized. In terms of the outlook for the second quarter, we try to manage what we can manage. We believe that our NIM on the overall basis should be stabilized somewhat at this level in terms of the outlook. Now let me go into more details for the by segment yield. You notice that on the retail side, yield dropped quite a fair bit on a Q1Q basis, and within that, on the right-hand side of the chart, housing loan dropped by roughly over 40 basis point. We would like to attribute this decline in housing loan yield in two main reasons. First one is we actually did quite a fair bit of preventive action for a good customer who want to refinance. So there's some pressure from competitive environment in the market right now, and the flight to quality will continue to be the case. So we continue to work more with top 6 developers and to try to go with high quality customers. So this has impacted our yield a little bit. But the other half of the effect is actually when we have more customers coming to the program, the relief program. When customers enter into loan modification, we actually, by accounting standard, we do need to do the adjustment of the EIR. So this has resulted in a reduction in our yield for the housing. Auto loan dropped a little bit, but this is mainly because of the mix. We are doing a lot more new car high purchase together with our partners, our preferred brands. So I think that has resulted in some drop in auto yield. Moving on to SME, you notice that SME actually stabilized. NIM on SME, we actually managed to book some new loans in the SME segment. The good sectors, good customers managed to stabilize. And the other fact is that when customer repay their soft loan, actually the soft loan contribution mix in the SME portfolio actually came down on a quarter-to-quarter basis. So this has also helped with our NIM, our yield when compared with the previous quarter. So it has stabilized in this quarter. Corporate dropped a little bit. This is basically we continue with our flight to quality segments, and we continue to work with large conglomerates working on big projects. So this has given some pressure on the yield for corporate segment. On the loan growth basis, we would like to mention the Q1Q change. We noticed corporate loan growth stabilized on a Q1Q basis. Retail customer also somewhat stabilized on a Q1Q basis, but within that we see some pickup in the housing loan. Basically, I think there's some resilience in the housing loan demand from the market, and we want to capture the good segment of that. SME loans, as I mentioned, we managed to grow SME loan a little bit this quarter versus the previous quarter as customer exit the soft loan program and repay the soft loan program. And we are pursuing a good segment of the SME loans. And as Dr. Yen Yong mentioned early on, economic activities pick up a little bit, and in particular the export segment. So that this has helped with our SME segment. In the first quarter of this year, we have a total of 14.6 billion new NPL formation. We include qualitative NPL in this number, but even though the amount of qualitative NPL is lower than what we saw in the previous 2 quarters, so roughly speaking, the qualitative NPL made up about over 20% of that new NPL number, and this is mainly coming from the retail segment. So the NPL percentage edged up a little bit to roughly 3.8%. We still keep our full year target at 4 to 4.5%. So that means that in the following quarters, there would be more NPL coming in either from natural flow or from qualitative assessment. So we believe that this NPL trend will still be within our expectation. Credit cost, we set 10 billion provision for the first quarter. It was a significant decline from the fourth quarter. It is still at a high level as a matter of prudent practice. Our normal provisioning cycle would imply a credit cost of roughly 120 to 130 basis points. So this is still a high credit cost level. Coverage ratio is still a comfortable level at 140%. We maintain our target that credit cost should be below 200 basis points. So right now, we need to assess the impact from the ongoing third wave pandemic, whether or not this will have any significant impact to our relief program. But nonetheless, we believe that the credit cost has already peaked in the fourth quarter of last year. The key highlight in our first quarter result was non-NII, and for this quarter, we saw a major uptick in the non-recurring part of the non-NII from 1.2 billion in the fourth quarter to 3.1 billion this quarter. So this is almost 2 billion increase incremental. This incremental, we would say, the majority is from the mark-to-market gain from some of the investment that SCB 10X had committed previously. So this is the first time, as I mentioned, that we have a meaningful contribution from SCB 10X. Apart from that, we also have gain, mark-to-market gain from other investments and also from trading gain. Even though these are non-recurring in nature, but given the commitment that we have in this investment from SCB 10X, from time to time we will see new development in this area. Now let's move on to the recurring portion of the non-NII. Bank assurance on a year-on-year basis increased 20%, but keep in mind that basically this year we have booked the performance linked bonus on a quarterly basis. So compared with the first quarter last year, it is a meaningful increase. But compared with the previous quarter, it was a drop because last year we booked the entire amount of the full year bonus in the fourth quarter. So that's why it showed a drop. Wealth management was very strong in the first quarter, and this is partly because of the very strong market in the first quarter, but also the fact that we have put in place a new way of servicing our wealth customers. We upskill our RMs to be more advisory model, and so with that we have been able to better service our customers, and we have been able to grow our AUM quite meaningfully. We managed to book more high value added products, so that gives us better return on for our revenue. So wealth management increased 60% year on year and up 34% on a Q-on-Q basis. And we saw an uptick in transaction banking on a Q-on-Q basis to about 13% increase on a Q-on-Q basis. So with all this improvement, we want to also highlight that we see some weakness, even though it is a strong quarter, but we started to see some weakness in the month of March because of the wave of pandemic, and actually the third wave started to come in late in the March. So we will continue to assess the impact of the third wave, not only to the relief program, but also to our fee income. Hopefully the third wave will be contained and controlled very quickly. OPEX was another bright spot for us, 15.1 billion baht for the quarter. It implies a 40% cost to income ratio. On a full year basis, we still keep our CI target at low to mid 40s. So as economy pick up later in the second half of the year, which one should expect, then OPEX probably will increase a little bit. Non-staff costs all came down on a Q-on-Q basis across the board. This is basically because of the our cost-based restructuring in the past, transformation and digital migration. That's all helped with our cost base that has reflected in non-staff Q-on-Q improvement. But we want to highlight a little bit on the employee costs. It showed a little bit of increase on a Q-on-Q basis, 7%. Partly that's because we had merit increase for our staffs in the first quarter, so that contributed to some increase on a Q-on-Q basis. But and apart from that, we also have some staff incentives, and those who perform really well in terms of selling the products, then we do provide extra incentives for our staffs. And beyond that, we also kind of built in some buffer in the case for the future if and when we need to have more early retirement program. So we put in a little bit of buffer in our number here so that it will help alleviate the impact in the future. But all in all, our number of branches continue to come down a little bit this quarter. Our number of employees also came down in this quarter versus the end of last year. We try to manage what we can manage under weak yield environment. So one thing that we can do is to improve our balance sheet structure. LD ratio has gone up to around 97%, but nonetheless, liquidity condition is still quite sufficient for us. So I think we don't see any issue there at this point in time. Our capital remain very strong, 17.1 CET1 ratio, 18.2 total capital adequacy ratio. So I think this is well above regulatory requirement and also well above our operating target. And we want to keep it that way for now because I think that's a good buffer for us to weather this pandemic crisis. We reaffirm our target for the whole year. Nothing changed here. Basically, that's the end of my presentation.